Nigeria, Africa's giant, stands at a dangerous crossroads. Will it continue to bow before the IMF and the World Bank, trapped in a cycle of endless loans and foreign puppetry? Or will it rise to join the Sahel sovereign movement alongside Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger and reclaim its destiny? This is not just Nigeria's choice. This is Africa's choice, and the consequences will ripple across the entire continent. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see why Nigeria's decision today could either secure Africa's sovereignty or chain us to neo-colonial masters for another century. And before we dive deep, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it. Because spreading truth about Africa's sovereignty is itself an act of resistance against the narrative Western media wants you to believe. Let's begin with the truth. Western analysts never want Africans to remember. Nigeria was never poor. Before colonial exploitation, the lands of the Niger River Basin were centers of trade, scholarship, and wealth. The kingdoms of Oyo, Benin, and Sokoto thrived, producing textiles, leather, agriculture, and gold. Nigeria was not dependent, it was powerful. But the British came with a mission: strip Nigeria of resources and control its future. They left behind borders designed for division, political elites trained in loyalty to London, and an economy tied to Western finance. And after independence in 1960, Nigeria's fate should have been in its own hands. Oil in the Niger Delta should have built an African powerhouse. Instead, the curse of foreign debt was planted. By the 1980s, Nigeria's external debt had exploded, not because Nigerians were living beyond their means, but because oil revenues collapsed and corrupt leaders signed lopsided deals with foreign creditors. The IMF stepped in with its structural adjustment programs. And what did those programs demand? Cut public spending on health and education, devalue the naira, open the economy to foreign corporations. These weren't reforms, they were chains. And those chains still bind Nigeria today. Let's be clear, the International Monetary Fund does not lend money to make nations rich, it lends to make them dependent. In 2023, the IMF projected Nigeria's debt service costs to consume over 90% of federal revenue, meaning nearly every naira collected in taxes and oil exports went not to Nigerian people, but to creditors abroad. And what does the IMF propose now? More austerity, more removal of subsidies, and more privatization. The latest example, President Bola Tinubu's decision in 2023 to remove fuel subsidies. Western media praised it as bold reform. But what happened to ordinary Nigerians? Prices skyrocketed. Transport costs doubled. Families already struggling were pushed to the brink. This is not reform. It is recolonization through economics. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's inflation hit over 25% in 2023, driven by subsidy removal and naira devaluation. Millions were pushed into poverty. And here is the painful irony. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer, yet ordinary Nigerians pay Western prices for fuel, while oil wealth flows to multinational corporations and debt repayments. Now, contrast this with what is happening in the Sahel. In Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has declared that Africa's resources must serve Africans first. In Mali, Assimi Goïta expelled French troops and nationalized gold mining contracts. In Niger, General Chiani ended uranium exploitation by France and redirected revenues to the people. These nations are not begging the IMF for crumbs. They are breaking free. And here is the most important point. The people support them. Despite Western propaganda calling them juntas, crowds in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou fill the streets waving flags, not because of dictatorship, but because for the first time in decades, they feel free. In August 2023, Niger officially suspended uranium and gold exports to France, redirecting negotiations toward African and non-Western partners. This was not chaos, it was sovereignty. Now imagine if Nigeria, with its 200 million people, and massive oil and gas reserves joined this Sahel sovereign movement. Imagine an alliance stretching from the Atlantic coast through the Sahel to the Red Sea. The balance of global power would shift overnight. And this is where Nigeria faces its choice. Will it continue down the IMF path of endless debt, poverty, and dependency? Or will it reclaim its sovereignty and stand with its Sahel neighbors in defiance of neo-colonial control? Before we go deeper, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you believe Africa deserves independence from foreign masters. Because when you share this message, you become part of the movement. But here is the hard truth. Nigeria has a leadership problem. While the Sahel produces men like Traoré and Goïta, Nigeria has been cursed with leaders too often loyal to Washington, London, or Paris instead of Abuja. From the military juntas of the 1980s to the civilian elites of today, too many Nigerian leaders view politics as a personal fortune, not a national mission. Transparency International consistently ranks Nigeria among the most corrupt governments in Africa, with billions siphoned from oil revenues into private accounts abroad. And here lies the danger. If Nigeria's leaders continue playing the IMF's game, they will not only betray their people, but also sabotage Africa's sovereignty movement. Because make no mistake, the West knows Nigeria's importance. Washington, Paris, and Brussels understand that if Nigeria joins the Sahel sovereign bloc, the entire colonial system in Africa collapses. That is why they pressure Nigerian leaders with promises of loans, military aid, and elite privileges. But let's not underestimate Nigerians themselves. This is a nation of resilient people. From the labor unions that fought colonial powers, to the youth movements that resisted military dictatorships, to the #EndSARS protests that shook the political elite in 2020, Nigerians have never been silent. The EndSARS protests were not only about police brutality, but also about deeper frustration with corruption, inequality, and foreign-backed policies that left millions hopeless. The question is, will this popular energy be channeled toward sovereignty, or will it be suppressed by the IMF's loyal servants in power? Because the people are awake, and when people wake up, no IMF loan can put them back to sleep. This is the great battle now unfolding in Nigeria. On one side, the IMF, Western corporations, and corrupt elites. On the other side, a new generation of Africans demanding sovereignty, inspired by the Sahel. The question is, which side will win? Stick with me, because now we'll uncover the geopolitical stakes, why the West is terrified of Nigeria turning towards sovereignty, how oil and gas pipelines shape this battle, and what Nigeria's decision means for Africa's future. Don't go anywhere. The most explosive revelations are still ahead. Why is the West so afraid of Nigeria breaking free from the IMF's grip? Why does Washington, London, and Paris spend billions ensuring that Abuja remains aligned? The answer is simple. Nigeria is the linchpin of Africa. If Nigeria joins the Sahel sovereignty wave, the entire neo-colonial architecture collapses. Let's dive into the geopolitical stakes, because this is about far more than economics. This is about the survival of Western power in Africa. To understand Nigeria's importance, we must start with its most powerful weapon, energy. Nigeria is the largest oil producer in Africa and holds the largest natural gas reserves on the continent. In 2022, it exported over 1.3 million barrels of oil per day, and its LNG, liquefied natural gas projects, are among the most strategically important in the world. Now, ask yourself, who benefits from this energy? Do Nigerian families enjoy cheap electricity, affordable fuel, and steady development? Or do Western corporations like Shell, ExxonMobil, and Total siphon billions in profits, while ordinary Nigerians sit in the dark? We know the answer. Nigeria produces oil for the world, but imports fuel for its people. Its refineries are deliberately sabotaged, ensuring dependency on foreign imports. This is not incompetence, it's design. And here is the fear. If Nigeria follows the Sahel path and nationalizes oil and gas, the global energy market would shift overnight. Imagine oil wealth redirected to schools, hospitals, and infrastructure instead of IMF debt repayments. Imagine Nigerian LNG contracts negotiated with Africa and Asia, not dictated by Europe. That would terrify Brussels, because as Europe's energy crisis deepens, they look not to their own production, but to Nigeria's pipelines. Let's talk pipelines, because these steel veins are the lifeline of empires. Two major pipeline projects make Nigeria a central battlefield of global energy politics. The Nigeria-Morocco Gas Pipeline, NMGP, a 7,000-kilometer project designed to pump Nigerian gas all the way to Europe through West Africa and Morocco. Who supports it? The European Union, who wants it delayed. Sovereignty advocates who see it as another form of exploitation. The Trans-Saharan Gas Pipeline, a direct route through Niger and Algeria, connecting Nigerian gas to European markets. For years, this project stalled, until France and the EU revived it as part of their plan to replace Russian gas. Do you see the pattern? The West wants Nigerian gas not for Africans, but to save European economies after the fallout of sanctions on Russia. And here's the twist. Niger's new leadership, after breaking with France, has threatened to disrupt Western access to pipelines. If Nigeria aligns with Niger, Europe's dreams of replacing Russian gas with African gas collapse. This is why the IMF clings so desperately to Abuja. Because the West knows if Nigeria flips, the pipelines flip. Of course, the West doesn't rely on economics alone. Where money fails, military force follows. Nigeria is a cornerstone of Western military strategy in Africa. It is a major partner in the so-called War on Terror, particularly in fighting Boko Haram in the northeast. The US and UK provide military training, arms, and intelligence, while French influence seeps through regional security arrangements. But let's be honest, what has decades of this Western partnership delivered? Boko Haram remains active, banditry spreads across the north, violence destabilizes communities. Here's the speculation many Africans whisper, but Western media avoids. Does the West deliberately allow instability to persist in Nigeria, just as they did in the Sahel, in order to justify their military presence and control? Because the pattern is clear: destabilize a region, then swoop in with aid and security that gives them permanent bases and leverage over African governments. Now imagine if Nigeria rejected this playbook. Imagine if Abuja declared, like Ouagadougou and Bamako, that Western troops are no longer welcome. The entire security architecture of Western Africa would collapse. And here is the question: is Nigeria ready to confront the West, not only economically but militarily and diplomatically? Before we dig deeper, if you believe Africa must defend its sovereignty against foreign puppeteers, make sure to hit the like button and share this video. The more people see this truth, the harder it is for Western propaganda to win. But let's be real. Nigeria faces not only external enemies, but internal divisions. Nigeria is a nation of over 250 ethnic groups and sharp religious divides between the Muslim North and Christian South. For decades, elites have used these divisions to distract the people while looting the treasury. The IMF, World Bank, and Western diplomats exploit this. Instead of unity, they thrive on division. Instead of sovereignty, they prefer chaos. In 2021, Nigeria overtook India as the country with the largest number of people living in extreme poverty, despite trillions in oil revenues over the decades. This is not natural. It is engineered poverty, designed to weaken national unity. Here is where the Sahel model offers a lesson. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, despite being smaller, are rallying diverse populations around the unifying banner of sovereignty. Traoré's speeches are not about religion or tribe. They are about Africa, dignity, and independence. If Nigeria can rise above its divisions, it can lead Africa into a new era. If not, it risks being torn apart, piece by piece, by the very forces that benefit from its weakness. So let's boil this down. Nigeria faces a historic decision. Stay with the IMF and Western puppetry, endless debt, dependence on fuel imports, Military partnerships that protect Western interests, not Nigerians. A divided people, easy to manipulate. Join the Sahel sovereignty movement. Nationalize oil and gas for the people. Strengthen ties with Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and beyond. End Western military dependence and build African-led defense. Unite Nigerians around dignity, sovereignty, and real independence. This is not just an economic decision, it is an identity decision. Who are Nigerians, puppets of Washington, or leaders of African liberation? And this brings us to the heart of the story. What happens if Nigeria chooses sovereignty? Stick with me, because now we'll explore the domino effect. How Nigeria's choice could trigger the collapse of neocolonialism across Africa. Why the West fears this more than anything. And what ordinary Africans can do to make sure sovereignty wins. You don't want to miss what comes next. What happens if Nigeria says no to the IMF and yes to sovereignty? This isn't just theory. It's the nightmare scenario for Western powers and the dream of every African who has longed for true independence. Because when Africa's most populous nation and largest economy stands tall, the entire continent will follow. Let's explore the domino effect that Nigeria's decision could unleash and why the West is fighting so hard to stop it. If Nigeria aligns with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, here's what could happen. West Africa's independence bloc expands the Sahel alliance, already defying France and the IMF, gains not just strength, but legitimacy. With Nigeria's population of over 200 million, this movement would represent nearly 500 million Africans. That is not a fringe group, that is a superpower. Economic chains. Begin to break Nigeria could renegotiate trade not with the IMF's blessing, but on Africa's terms. Oil for African nations at African prices. Gas pipelines prioritized for African industrialization, not European survival. Imagine what that means for Ghana, Senegal, or even South Africa. Political awakening across the continent. If Nigerians see sovereignty deliver real results, the message to Africans everywhere is clear. We do not need the IMF. We do not need French bases. We do not need Western approval. This is why the West fears Nigeria's pivot. Because one Nigerian move could set off a chain reaction that no foreign army or banker can contain. One of the most powerful symbols of French neocolonialism is the CFA franc, a currency used by 14 African countries but controlled by Paris. France still requires CFA nations to deposit half their foreign reserves in the French treasury. This means African wealth literally funds French stability. Now here's the speculation. If Nigeria, with its economic size, backed the Sahel bloc, pressure to abandon the CFA franc would reach critical mass. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are already discussing a sovereign currency. With Nigeria's support, the CFA could collapse entirely. Imagine the headlines. France loses control over African currency. It would not just be economics, it would be psychological liberation. But sovereignty is not isolation. It is choosing partners wisely. Today, Africa's trade with China is worth over $250 billion annually, far outpacing trade with the US or Europe. Russia has increased military and energy partnerships. Turkey, India, and Brazil are expanding their footprint. This is the multipolar world. And it terrifies the West because for the first time in centuries, Africa has options. If Nigeria joins the sovereignty bloc, it can choose partnerships that serve Nigerians, not puppet masters. It can sell oil to Asia, import technology from Turkey, secure defense deals with Russia, or create regional trade with its neighbors. The point is, sovereignty means choice. Puppetry means dependence. And this is why the IMF, the EU, and Washington will fight to the very last breath to keep Nigeria in their orbit. Before we continue, if you believe Africa deserves true independence and not recycled colonialism, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it widely. Every click weakens Western propaganda. Now, Let's not be naive. If Nigeria turns sovereign, the West will not clap politely and wish them luck. They will fight back, using every weapon they have. Economic sanctions. They will attempt to isolate Nigeria, cutting off trade or freezing assets. Media propaganda. Expect endless headlines about Nigeria sliding into dictatorship, just as they smear Traoré and Goita. Internal destabilization, old fault lines, ethnic rivalries, religious tensions will be exploited to weaken sovereignty. Military pressure. NATO or ECOWAS could be pushed to threaten interventions, just as they did against Niger. In 2023, ECOWAS, under heavy Western pressure, threatened military intervention in Niger after the sovereignty movement took power. This shows the playbook. Use regional bodies as proxies for Western interests. The question is, will Nigerians fall for it? Or will they recognize the game and resist? At the end of the day, sovereignty is not just about leaders, it is about people. Ibrahim Traoré himself said, "No leader can succeed if the people are not ready to defend their sovereignty." For Nigeria, this means ordinary citizens must demand that oil revenues serve Nigerians. Farmers, workers, students, elders, everyone must push back against IMF lies and elite corruption. Nigeria's labor unions are among the strongest in Africa. In 2023, they organized mass strikes against subsidy removal, showing the people still have the power to resist destructive policies. If the people unite around sovereignty, no puppet politician can stand in their way. And this is where you come in. As Africans, as global citizens, the battle for sovereignty is not fought only in parliaments. It is fought in minds, in conversations, and yes, even in videos like this one. That's why your like, comment, and subscription matters. It amplifies African voices against a global system designed to silence us. Let us dare to imagine what Nigeria could become if it chooses sovereignty. Refineries working at full capacity, turning oil into affordable fuel for Nigerians, not imports. Naira strengthened, not devalued by IMF dictates. Schools and hospitals funded by resource wealth, not aid dependency. Nigerian technology hubs competing with Silicon Valley, supported by African markets. A West Africa united, sovereign, and respected in global affairs. This is not fantasy. This is the future within reach, if Nigeria makes the bold choice. So here we are. The crossroads is clear. On one side, IMF puppetry, poverty disguised as reform, corruption rewarded with foreign loans, a Nigeria forever on its knees. On the other side, Sahel sovereignty, courage, dignity, and freedom. A Nigeria standing tall as the leader of Africa's liberation. Which path will Nigeria take? That's the question only Nigerians can answer. But the world is watching, Africa is watching, and history will remember. If you believe in sovereignty, if you believe Africa's resources belong to Africans, then stand with this movement. Like this video. Share it with your friends. Subscribe to this channel. Every action helps break the silence that Western media wants to impose. Because Nigeria's choice is not just Nigeria's future, it is Africa's destiny.